us know. As always, very exciting to be here today. For those of you who don't know me, I'm going to go ahead and get things started very slowly as we have several people probably still coming in. But I'm Ari Farrell. I am the World Young Credit Union Professional Program Manager. I am based in Madison, Wisconsin, USA. I have the beautiful opportunity of working with the Worldwide Foundation for Credit Unions under them, and with the World Council of Credit Unions as well. Very exciting times here. Lots of time for change, lots of time for, making sure that we're all in the same place, the same time, moving forwards. And I'm really excited for everything we have going on. Lots of opportunities. So please check out our website for the calendar and for more to come. WYCUP specifically has, we are going to be at the World Credit Union Conference again, doing our in-person summit, and that's in Stockholm, Sweden. And we'll be bringing our scholars there as well. And we are actually, in fun news, piloting a partnership with Filene. This year to take some folks from the US sector and get them more engaged through the crash program. So we're piloting a crash the WCUC. So stay tuned for the future. If it all goes well, we will be looking at all y'all to be able to apply and come with us to another way of engaging with WYCUP, another way of engaging with the World Credit Union Conference. It's going to be so great. And if your credit union wants to support and sponsor that, please let us know. We are very open to making sure that everyone has access to learning opportunities to help them grow in their careers. That's what we are all about. And I am so glad I worked closely with Cortney as a friend and as a cooperative partner through Filene, so we can put on events like this for you all and make them accessible for you all the time. So we rarely ever ask for money from you, but if you have a spare dollar or two, five, please feel free to slide it our way so we can cover costs of putting these events on for you. Again, we never ask for you to pay anything out of pocket if you don't have it. That's why we're here, to make sure that we can keep growing and learning. So with that, that's me there. And with the Worldwide Foundation for Credit Unions, I just would be shameful of me not to plug in that we also operate with the Global Women's Leadership Network and the Global DE program, which is the International Credit Union Development Educator certification. So certificate. So if you're interested in any of those, we're all in one place. So just reach out to us. If you're a DE, if you're not a DE, go find out what that is. Get curious, become a DE in your area. We really think that, development educators are great, and then become more a part of WYCUP. How can we help you where you're at, where your credit union is, to get you feeling like you're secure and ready for that next step in your career journey? So really, really exciting stuff we have going on. And just a note that, like, we have a lot of ways that you can engage with us throughout the year. This is a little bit of a diorama of just that visual representation, but ultimately we have we're at the GAC. We have the World Conference, we have virtual events. Global Women's launched a partnership with E-Leadership Academy to do programming there. And then we have International Credit Union Day coming up in October again every year, folks. So we handle that for you. So let us know how we can support you and get you the materials that you're looking for, because your journey in your credit union globally is unique to you, and we want to make that experience the best it can be. YCUP, of course, has scholarships, networks, and summits. So if you're interested in anything beyond just today's meeting, reach out to me, reach out to us. There's always stuff that we can plug you into. And as we grow and expand, just keep your eyes open. Join our mailing list, which is the sign up on our website, and we would love to keep in touch. Very open line of communication with me in our program. So we can, if we can help, we will. But let's figure out how we can partner together. And I want to shout out True Stage and Valera really quick from my slides, even though it's supposed to be the last slide. Don't worry about it. They are huge supporters of YCUP, and we could not be here without them. And Cornerstone has definitely donated to us before, so has Go West in the past, and other associations and credit unions. So thank you all for your support. If you're a member of them, you're a member of us. The Illinois Credit Union League has also done things with us, so I just don't want to fail to mention how closely tied we are together in the work that we're doing. So on that note, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and let Cortney jump in. And while she's doing that, I just am going to bring up her bio, because she actually has a very unique bio of that could be very different than what we have going on. But Cortney, in general, aims to prepare credit unions for the next generation. She gets to work with a lot of credit unions to get them ready for that next step, and that's what gets us excited, gets us out of bed every day. So what she always remains true to the people helping people philosophy. She thrives on making human connections to understand what drives people and then helps guide them using research-based solutions. When Courtney isn't working or traveling, which she travels a lot for work because she is there for you all, she enjoys camping, hiking, coffee, yoga. I'm going to add that in there because you didn't. Watching Futurama, Fringe, Bob's Burgers, and cuddling with her two cats, Millie and Francis. So, on that note, Courtney, take it away live from what, DCUC? Where are you at right now? Where in the
Oh
world
gosh. Yeah, I'm in Arlington, Texas at Visa Payments Forum,
Wow.
hosting a crash actually um, in between. So I'm very excited to be here, and in real Filene fashion. This is what we do, right? We're connecting people. We're here, and there's no better place to be than with all of you right now. Before I get started, I do want to say I'm just so honored for the privilege to be able to work with the World Council to really connect North America internationally. Ari does such an incredible job to really bring the international to the United States, and I want to bring the US to them. And so, really excited to see so many familiar faces. Thanks for being here. And if you have never had the fire hose of Filene's innovation, today that's what you're gonna get. So we're gonna dive right in because we truly we truly don't have the most time to do this. And really we do have a joke in Filene. It's really like drinking from the fire hose. So I'm just gonna go ahead, dive right in. Hi, I'm Courtney. What Ari didn't mention, actually I didn't mention because I didn't put it in my bio, is I also worked in a credit union. So I spent about 8 years working in a contact center in Southern California. And I also spent another 5 years working in a contact center of a savings and loan. Those don't exist anymore. So a lot of service, a lot of work in financial services, and primarily in member and customer service. And so I say that because that is the lens in which I approach innovation. And so we're going to get right into that. So why do we innovate as credit unions, and how is Filene positioned to really support you? Or, even if you're not a member of Filene, you could go to Google and type in innovation method, and there are a lot of ways to study innovation and to be more innovative. But really, what Filene does and what our goal is we want to balance the research with the ability to inspire you to come up with new big ideas while giving you the tools to do so. So often, I, I talk with credit union people and I hear stories of, I'm not creative, or, I'm not the type of person that can come up with the next big bright idea. And it's kind of disheartening to hear because one, anyone can come up with a new idea. I think the challenge is that we were never given a process and we don't have a lot of time or capacity to practice. And so I think the assumption is that people are just born innovative, just like people are born creative. And yes, people can have a natural ability to be more creative, to be more innovative, whether that's with sports or music or art. However, something that I think we can all agree on is even the best of the best, the folks that are winning every game, the artists that are just on top of, their craft, they're practicing, they're putting in time, they're putting in effort. And that's one thing that I will say about innovation is anyone can be innovative, anyone can be creative. It's just how much are we willing to put in to really grow that muscle, and be willing to fail, be willing to put out ideas that aren't always going to be the winner. So there'll be a lot of opportunities for me to ask you some big questions throughout the next about 40 minutes or so. Um, because of time, I'm going to ask if you can put some of this into the chat. So I'm curious if you have a definition of innovation, go ahead and pop it into the chat. And maybe not definition, but maybe just the way that you perceive it or the way that you interpret it. I would love for you all to share that because there is so there are so many definitions of innovation, right? There isn't just one way to define it. While Filene does have a few different ways, I'm really curious to hear from all of you. So go ahead, put that in, and while you're doing that, I am going to share our namesake, Ed Filene. I'm going to share his definition of innovation. And what he would say is that progress is the constant replacing of the best there is with something better. And I really love that. It was such an eye opener for me and such an aha moment when I came to work at Filene and I read that. And, it really gave me hope to say, it doesn't always have to be the best thing, the biggest thing. It can just be a small improvement. It can just be an incremental thing that's going to make someone's life fractionally better. So we have a few answers in the chat, which I love. So thank you, everyone. Jessica says, new ideas to improve processes. Absolutely. Sarah, hi, Sarah. Sarah says, future prepping. 100% absolutely correct. Chance, hey, Chance. Oh, love seeing all these lovely familiar faces. It's so fun. Not being afraid to try new ideas, procedures, tactics, etc. Absolutely. Those are all correct. And one thing that I will also say is, and by giving you a process, you can be more consistent when you practice your innovation. And this is also a really awesome way to prepare your team to think more strategically, to think more innovatively, as well as giving your entire team organization the same language around how to solve problems, which can be really beneficial when we think about approaching problem solving at an organizational level. So, this is the Filene method of innovation. There are 6 steps. This can be done in a quick method. This can be done over a 6-month period, a 9-month period. This is something that is constantly iterating. We're always gathering insights. We're always developing empathy. The purpose is that we want to truly understand the problems that our members, our communities, and our teams are facing every single day. And through that discovery, using data, using empathy, using that human side, what do people truly experience? We're able to decide, or excuse me, we're able to ideate on solutions, right? We're able to be creative and think in a perfect world, how would we solve some of these problems for our family, friends, and our community? But we also know that we can't just launch ideas without knowing whether or not we believe that they're going to be effective. And that's where we also bring in the skill of prototyping and testing. So building out your idea in such a way that if someone were to witness it or observe it or just see, a really rough sketch, they could understand what it is that you're trying to accomplish, and they would potentially give you feedback and let you know, yes, no, we want this, we don't want this. And then at the end, ideas are nothing if we're not willing to share them. And we have to be able and effective to get our message across in such a way that our peers and our superiors are going to be able to say yes to implementation. And so when we think about innovation, it seems so simple, right? If you just follow these steps, boom, there you go, you have it. But what inevitably ends up happening is the data doesn't always, we don't always get the data we want, right? And so what does that mean? We have to potentially shift gears because what we think might be the answer isn't the answer. We learn that the idea that we came up with or the solution that we came up with, our members or our teams or our communities, they really don't like it as much as we thought. Or perhaps you learn, yep, this is going to be a winner. But what usually ends up happening throughout this process and why it can be so troublesome is that it does kind of feel like you're moving backwards and forwards all in one. And so I'm going to pause really quickly, just check the chat. I have a couple more definitions. I love it so much. Okay, small, consistent steps that lead to extraordinary results. Awesome. Jeremiah, good. It's been ages. Really good to see you, Jeremiah. And Nellie says innovation is working with what you have. Innovation is working with what you have in for better results. Yeah, absolutely. All really solid examples. Okay. So in a perfect world, we all have the time and space to just practice whatever process it is that we're using to solve a problem, whether it's the Filene method of innovation or another. However, throughout this process, we've found, and I'm sure you have found just living and being in the world and working in a credit union or not in a credit union, that there's sometimes barriers to solving problems, whether we want them to be there or not. Usually, we obviously don't want barriers to problem solving, but they tend to show up. And here are a few that you see on your screen that we tend to see organization wide, not just credit unions, but across industries. The idea that it's easier to just stick our head in the sand than it is to anticipate what might be happening in the world around us. That's an example of organizational ostrich syndrome. So we might see that when organizations might be refusing to implement new technology. So I think a good example of this might be automated processes that might lead to the implementation of artificial intelligence technology. If that idea is really scary and we don't want to take on the risk of using AI, we might just stick our head in the sand and say, no, we don't need artificial intelligence. That's not something that's going to be important to us. We're just going to keep going down the path that we're going down. But what we know is that the world is moving towards artificial intelligence. So, in what ways can we actually start to ensure that our systems are going to be ready for that type of technology? Another really good example is overconfidence. And this happens often because we think we know our members, we think we know the best way to solve a problem. But what can happen is we end up in a big credit union echo chamber where we become so overconfident that we start to lose the spirit of what we are here to do. And that's really to serve our members, to serve our community, and to make impact in ways that really do make people's lives better. So there's a few other examples up here. If you know, need to shout out your organization, but if you have experienced one of these or many of these, feel free to put it into the chat. If you have a little story that you want to share, sometimes it feels good to know that you're not alone. I'm going to keep moving on, but would love to see if anyone has experiences and experienced any of these. They please go ahead and feel free to share. But why innovate? Why is it so important that we do this? I will not have you answer that question because I have data that's going to tell us the answer to that question. And this data comes from a survey that we did with Illuminous. I think they might have changed their name again, but they have done the American Innovation Index survey. So it's a big survey in North America that spans all kinds of different industries, not just credit unions, not even just financial services. But because they administer that survey, they're also able to support Filene in doing that survey with credit unions. And not just credit union team members, but credit union members answer these questions. And that's why this is so, so critical. So, why is innovation so important for credit unions? Well, we know based on what our credit union members have told us is that it drives loyalness, attractiveness, and it really does keep your members happy. It keeps them engaged with your organizations. And as you can see here, the most innovative credit unions, so this is from your members' opinion, they score highest in loyalty, brand attractiveness, and NPS. So if your members think that you're innovating and they think that you're trying to make improvements on products and services that are going to help them be better, live better, then they're more likely to use your services. And why is that important? Because our services, our products, the mix in which we are offering, checking accounts and savings accounts and credit cards, we want our members to use more of them. So we know the bread and butter, it's easy to get the members in on the savings account. Everyone has to have that share. And the checking account really is where we see the majority of credit union transactions. But wouldn't we love to see more credit card usage? I know that's something that I hear all the time. Wouldn't we love to see more deposits? Another thing that I hear frequently. But it can be really challenging when members don't necessarily know that you offer the products that are going to fit with them. And there's a whole bunch of other reasons why they may not go to the credit union for something like a certificate of deposit, for example, when they know that there might be another option that they see, on TikTok or Instagram that's going to give them a high yield savings account with liquidity right away. So again, these are things that we're competing against, but if the member, your member, thinks that, this is still a really good credit card product, this does work for me because it gives me, X, Y, and Z back, we can see here that the product usage all the way across does increase. Now, is it huge? No. But if we start to get more members utilizing more products, one thing that we also know about the credit union system is that word of mouth is incredibly important. So there are ways in which that we can balance this need for innovation to really think differently about the ways that we're solving problems and creating new products and services, or potentially shifting messaging. It might not even be a new product that you need to create. And with this, there are so many things that are challenging our credit union leaders right now. So just things that as emerging leaders, some things for it's important for us to be aware of, and probably some things that we're also seeing and feeling as we've been, again, just being human beings in the world right now. There's just a lot going on. So the pressure is on from many different angles, and innovation can help us do things more quickly and in a less risky way and as cheaply as possible, which I'll get to in just a second. But humans are at the center. It is so critical that as we continue to solve, challenges, problems, that we are always keeping the human being at the center of that challenge. If we're doing that, we're doing and we're designing in what they call human-centered design, leading with what people want, things that they desire, and then moving into what is feasible and what's viable. And that's a really different way for us to think about problem solving, because so often, especially in a world where I just showed you a lot of uncertainty, it can be really difficult for credit union leaders to say, how much is it going to cost? Is this technologically feasible? Do we have the team members that are going to be able to implement, what it is that we're proposing? So those are all valid questions. It's not to say that we shouldn't consider the cost of things, but where we can begin is, okay, well, what is it that our members actually need? And then we can start to create from the blue sky. So create from the place of in a perfect world, and then start to really think about how we can include, that little bit of reality that is actually very important to lifting your idea up. And so as we move forward, I'm just going to go through the Filene method through each of the steps and just provide some examples of how you can utilize this immediately in your job right now. And this is also something that you could potentially use even outside. Um, Other issues or other challenges that are coming up. Perhaps you have some kiddos and you're on like your soccer coach. I don't know. Whatever your at home problem might be, this could also be a potential assistance there. So, gathering insights, the first step. And I am going to start this step with a story. So, if you have gone to a mall, this is what you see up here. When you see a salesperson, or I call them a kiosk person, selling an item, not in a store, but the kiosk in the hallways of the mall, if you could put into the chat, what is the first thing that you do when you see the kiosk person? Go another way, avoid eye contact, ditto. Uh, yeah, I'm gonna go with those three, but if look the other way, check on things, check, yep, that tracks. Um, I would say when I ask this question, 99% of people say, I go the other direction, I avoid eye contact, I look the other way, I start talking to the other person. I've had one person that has said, I really love it when the kiosk person approaches me and tries to make a sale. And I'm like, well, you're the diamond in the rough because that rarely ever happens. Most of the time, When we see that individual, we immediately try to avoid making some type of contact because what inevitably will happen is if we make eye contact or he sees us or they see us and we're like, boom, here it is, they try to make the sale. And we don't always want that to happen. And so it's just a really interesting insight. Does it tell us a lot? It tells us some interesting things about human behavior and potential sales tactics. But the reality is, and the reason why I love this story so much is that it really demonstrates that insights can happen anywhere. They can happen everywhere and in the wild, but they are also really important that we're gathering. It's also really important that we're gathering insights from a data perspective as well. So while we are out and about and we're, observing people and how they're interacting, in the wild, we also need to start to find actual data that supports what we observe as well. So, gathering insights is how we can begin to develop real empathy and real understanding for what our members and what our teams are going through. So, as we are gathering our insights, we are starting from this sort of unstructured world. And as we go through the Filene method, we're going to start to move into a more structured research. We're going to move into more structured research methods. We don't always know what we don't know. And so when we start, a lot of the times we're just asking questions, we're observing. And then from there, we might start to ask more questions. We might set up some interviews. We might do some focus groups. But as we start to dive deeper into the innovation process, our research and the ways in which that we start to gather that data is going to shift slightly. And so, why do I bring this up? Because the next step is going to be developing empathy. And how do we do that? Well, we need to talk to people. We need to talk to our members. We need to talk to our community, the individuals that are experiencing the problem that we are noticing as we're out gathering our insights. It becomes critical that we are really trying our best to understand who these individuals are, and more so just from a financial services perspective. Most people don't wake up and think about their credit union unless they might be having some real significant financial troubles. Maybe they're thinking about it because something terrible has happened, but it's not like most people are waking up and thinking, "Oh, I'm so excited. I can't wait to call my credit union today," or "I can't wait to, look at my online banking." That's just not a typical thought that a lot of people have. And so empathy becomes so critical in this process. So that way we can remove our experience as financial service providers. It's not to say that it has to go away. We just have to put it aside so that way we can really be as understanding and empathetic of the individuals that we're really trying to solve with. We have to bring them in so that way we are creating with those individuals. We're not solving a problem for people. And so we assist and aid this process by doing what's called an empathy map. And I know there are probably several different ways to do empathy maps. If any of you have done DE, it's definitely an exercise that's done in DE. In fact, this example that you see up on your screen is um, a credit union member that participated in one of the Credit Union National Foundation's programs aimed at terminating medical debt. And so they graciously allowed us to use this empathy map, but this is a real empathy map based on a real member that was going through a really challenging time because she had breast cancer. And we know that that can be really detrimental to finances. But on top of that, uh, you know, we also know that oftentimes our members, when they have some type of terminal illness, we also may never know about it. And they may be suffering silently, not just, physically, but also financially. And so empathy maps enable us to really understand, again, who are the individuals that are experiencing the challenges that we are trying to solve. So that way, when we begin to ideate, we're ideating from a perspective that is not ours, again, with our experience and our expertise. So, multiple empathy maps are always really, really important because what can also happen, I'm just going to pop back to this for a second. What can also happen, and just like a warning against it, is if we just do the one empathy map, then we're only also thinking about one individual. And it will become important as we solve problems that the population size is large enough that it's going to be valuable for the credit union to invest. Now, I don't say that to say, okay, well, then we have to help the majority. No, that's not it either. That's saying, okay, let's really go out and talk to multiple people because no single group is a monolith. No single person can speak for another individual completely. And so as we build more empathy maps, we start to see less stereotypical responses and we really start to see real, authentic, um, meaningful responses that help you create and really solve problems from, again, that human perspective. So, once we've developed that empathy, once we have our data library with our insights, potential observations, we can really say, all right, we understand the environment, we understand what's happening in the world, we understand how this is affecting our members or our team. What is the actual root cause of this problem? So, avoiding surface level problems, really diving into how can we get down to the core so that way we're not putting a band-aid over, so it's not a band-aid solution or, a quick fix, but really saying, okay, we're going to eradicate this challenge so that way it doesn't happen again. And identifying the problem is probably the most, I'm not gonna say probably, it is the most challenging part of the innovation process. I know there are a few familiar faces that have seen this in action. Um, it can be challenging because we generally start at the surface when it comes to problem solving. We start with what's easy to see, but what's easy to see isn't always the core of the challenge. And so the way that we start this step is by really trying to say, okay, who is that specific audience? And is this challenge crystal clear? So I love this quote from Albert Einstein. He says, if I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and 5 minutes thinking about solutions, which is so counterintuitive to, I think, the ways in which we typically approach problem solving. We say, okay, this is the problem. You go into your boss's office and you say, hey, boss, I noticed this problem. And it almost immediately you're expected to have a solution. Now, the challenge with that is that we don't necessarily even know what the real problem is. And so taking that time to really dive in, this is where language really matters. And this is where it really demonstrates, do we have a clear understanding of who is experiencing this problem? And so I said earlier when we were discussing the empathy, it's important to do more than one empathy map because the who is critical. We're doing this from the human perspective. There's something called the curb cut effect, and that's where you solve a problem for one person and it may have unintended benefits for entire groups of individuals. And what a beautiful way to solve problems. And so when we think about the curb cut effect, what does that actually mean? Well, back long, long ago in the United States, there used to be a big challenge, and that is that there were giant curbs that lined streets. And it really prevented people um, from very easily getting on and off of a lawn or parking vehicles or riding bikes, or if they had a wheelchair, just all kinds of different things, right? Until I don't know, one day, I don't know even who the inventor is, until they started cutting little divots into the curb. And we all know what those little divots enabled, right? Those line the driveways. They allow bikes to get up onto the curb. They allow folks using wheelchairs to get up onto the curb, people using strollers to get up onto the curb. There are so many people that benefited from that tiny little divot, that tiny little curb cut. So, thinking really, really big picture, who are all the people experiencing this problem becomes just one of the most critical parts of problem identification. And then the second piece is, are we approaching this from their perspective? And so often we are approaching the problem from our perspective. And what do I mean by our perspective? Our credit union perspective, our credit union experience, the fact that we've worked, in the credit union for X amount of years. We know the policies, we know the procedures, we know the members, we know how to fix this. But are we approaching it from the perspective of the member? Do they believe that it's a problem that they even have? And I think this is a really good example as we consider financial wellness and financial education programs. Are we approaching this from the perspective of the user? Do they believe that it's a problem that they have? And so back, when the big conversation was about millennials, we used to do research specifically on generational money usage, and we've actually gone back to that again. So I'm super excited. But what was really interesting about 2014 and 2015, Filene really wanted to understand this idea of millennials and financial literacy. And so they went out and they asked, millennials, hey, like, are you financially literate? And they said, oh, absolutely. Heck yes, we are brilliant. We don't need any help. We're super smart. We're good. And they said, okay, cool. You're good. Here's a quiz. 5 simple financial questions. And the majority of those millennials that answered the survey answered 75% of the questions incorrectly, which would lead you to believe maybe they're not as financially literate as they thought. Now, the challenge was, okay, let's create all these financial education programs geared toward helping millennials. Well, they didn't think that they had a problem. So what inevitably ends up happening is we created all these financial education programs geared towards millennials that aren't necessarily being used because they didn't think that it was a problem that they had. So approaching it from their perspective again becomes critical, taking off our credit union hat, putting it aside, and really thinking about our members from their perspective, how they solve this problem and what would be desirable to them, also allows us to move right into number 3, and that is avoiding value judgments, where we say, well, if the members just saved more, they wouldn't be in this problem. Or if they just did this, then this wouldn't happen. Well, all they need to do is this. Well, if they just worked harder, all of the things that we could potentially say, things that, for every now and then just slip out because we're human and it is natural to judge. But that's when we say, oh, okay, pause. That's not okay. We got to still solve these problems and move forward. What ends up happening when we have those value judgments embedded into our problem statement is people will then begin to push away. So the people that we're really aiming to help won't want our assistance because they'll feel the judgment in the problem in and of itself. And so those 3 steps are really important, but it requires a lot of intention. It requires a lot of thoughtfulness and a lot of reframing, a lot of going back to the drawing board and doing it over again. All right, so last but not least, you want to make sure that that is the problem, excuse me, the solution is not embedded in the problem statement. So much easier said than done, because as we're going through this process, we already think we know how to solve this problem. And we haven't even crafted our problem statement yet. And so always ensuring that we aren't solving anything before we even get to that. That's step 4 of problem solving. But once you get that statement, it's like you're on that slide down, and this is where the fun can really begin. Actually, it's all a lot of fun. I will just say your brain might hurt and feel a little bit mushy coming out of problem identification. And perhaps that's why ideation just feels really, really fun and really, really exciting. And the other reason why it feels really, really fun and really, really exciting is because we're still living in this world of if it were perfect and if I could, if I had Oprah dollars, how would I solve this problem? It's a really cool way to try to solve a problem. Doesn't mean we can stay there, but that's where we start to say, okay, well, we can't do that, but what really exists is this, and we can add this, and here are some other features that, are in the realm of feasibility and viability. So we want to find as many solutions to the problem that we discovered as possible. And then as a group, really working on, okay, well, what's really worth exploring here? And some ways to think about what is worth exploring here are just a few different things here. So Desirability, who are your members? What is it that they want? We'll know this because we have ample research that we did in our insights gathering. We have several empathy maps that we also drew up. So we should have a very clear picture of what's going to be the value proposition. What is going to give this solution the competitive advantage? And you're going to know who your member and customer segments are and those relationships because you built those empathy maps. You'll know how they want to engage with you. You'll know how you need to send messages to them, etc. So the next way to think about ideation is how can we make it, right? So, yes, we can live in the blue sky, in the dream state until we have to make it real. And that's when you really have to say, okay, how can we make it? Who would need to be involved in our organization? Would it need to be risk management? Would it need to be IT? Would we have to get learning and development involved? What resources would be necessary? Do we think we might need full-time team members to develop, a new interface for online banking? Whatever it might be, really understanding who is going to need to be involved, what is going to have to happen to implement and build this idea. And then last but certainly not least, always important to think about is, can this be financially sustainable? Do we have the dollars to actually do this? What do we expect the expenses to be? But also at the same time, are we going to get some sort of revenue in return for this solution? Now, is revenue always critical? Not always, but it depends on the value that you're adding back to your members. So if we go back all the way to the very, very beginning of this presentation where I showed you the slides on innovation and how members rated their credit unions, that can also add value. Are we creating sticky, loyal members that are going to keep coming back, that are going to keep using our products and services? So there are ways that you can solve problems, even if you think, oh, this isn't going to be a revenue generator. Should I do it? It still may solve a problem and add value to your organization's product mix. And Chance, you're absolutely right. Always involve your risk management teams. I love involving them in innovation. Um, it's really fun because then you get to use your creativity too. And I think sometimes that doesn't always get to happen with our risk management folks. Um, all right, moving right along, because I know time is of the essence. So prototyping and testing. Step number 5, the goal here is to create a minimum viable product. Basically, how can we create an example of this solution as quickly as possible, as cheaply as possible? And really, when we think about this from a team perspective, from a department perspective, we will likely not have the opportunity to build, a mock website in such a way that it looks exactly perfect. So how could you potentially still build something that your team would understand? You can create a schematic drawing. You can use flip charts and flip cards. You can draw. You can do a skit. It doesn't necessarily have to be perfect because again, the point is to get the solution in an understandable way, right? So if someone's like, oh, I understand how that's supposed to work, perfect. That's all you really need. I don't have the picture in here, but if you Google a prototype of the very first iPhone, it looks nothing like an iPhone. It didn't need to look like an iPhone. It just needed to get the point across of what the iPhone was going to do. And it did that by showing you the very first iPod Touch. And it had the iPod Touch plugged into a computer, which had speakers, which had a modem. And it really just got the point across. So imagine you have your iPod Touch, but it was a computer that also connected to your phone, that also allowed you to play music. Envision this world. And so designing your prototype, that's really all you need to ask people to do. And so you can do that in, again, a few different ways: the storyboard, the drawing, a mock-up. Skits can work pretty well if this is like a team or a small department sort of change that you're looking to implement. Now, the second piece of prototyping and what brings everything to life and really just kind of takes everything home is we have to understand, is this going to be effective? And we do that by testing. Where we can really run into trouble is if we just say, yep, this is going to be the product. We have the insights. We did the empathy map. Let's implement. But we actually didn't test with our members. So some ways to do that is just really understanding, what do we still need to know about this? What's missing? that we don't know yet. Who do we need to ask? Like, who do we need to test this with? Which members? Is it all of our members? Is it just a specific subset? And how are we going to ask them these questions? Are we going to bring them in and do interviews? Are we going to do surveys? Are we going to do, observations where we say, hey, come and interact with our new website and we want to observe how it works? Whatever it might be, just making that decision, how are we going to do this? And then once you have that set, is really thinking about, okay, we have our target audience, we're going to focus on them. And how many people do we want to target? Statistically significant, you need at least 30 people from each group. And that's a really good place to start. So, firsthand observations, using recorded data. Honestly, your member contact centers are filled with all kinds of interesting data from your members that could potentially be used. And it's just recording, it's a pot of gold just sitting in your contact centers. One-on-one interviews, another really great way to get some super, super good qualitative data. What we've also found that can be challenging is that people want to be compensated for your time. And so just depending on how you approach it, you just have to be really careful, really cautious, depending upon what your budgets might be. And you might not have a budget. And so that might mean that it's just going to be surveys, and soliciting feedback in ways that aren't going to cost additional dollars. Okay, so what sorts of questions do you want to ask? Well, you really want to get down to the brass tacks. Do you like it? Is this attractive? Do you think that you're going to continue to use it? Do you understand what this is looking to do? I want to understand the pain points. So, at what points was there friction in this process? And then another really interesting question is, what would you be willing to pay for using this? Um, it may be nothing, but you might also find that if the solution provides value, members sometimes are willing to pay a small amount for a product or service that is really going to add additional value. And we're starting to see this with subscription pricing in a lot of different financial institutions in a lot of different ways. All right, moving right along. Our last step is reporting what you've learned. And that is, how are we going to tell the story of our solution in a way that's so compelling that our boss can't say no? And you do that with data, and you do that with really understanding how can we implement this? What is it going to take? And all of those things that I showed on that slide where it said desirability, feasibility, and viability, which you will have access to all of these slides later, is again, who's going to need to be involved? How much do we think this is going to cost? What sort of incoming revenue are we going to get? But also connecting it to the why, connecting it to the member, connecting it to the value of why it's so critical that we are continuing to offer innovative products and services. And that's because we want our members to continue to be our members. We want them to stay loyal, and we want them to shout our credit union's names from the rooftops. And so when we think about building out that sales pitch, I encourage you to envision yourself as a Shark Tank participant, right? You've put all your blood, sweat, and tears into this solution. Be excited about it. Be big, be bold. And just know that when you have that passion and it's backed up with data, it's really hard for people to say no. They still might say no, but they'll see something in you, and they'll also see something in that project and in that solution that it might be a not right now, but let's put that in our project plan for 2025 or 2026. So making innovation real, I'm just going to end with, it takes a lot of patience. It takes practice. And then last, it takes grit. It is not easy to get up and share an idea that people potentially might not like. And so if you have ever done that, one, kudos to you. It takes a lot of bravery. And if it's something that you feel like you don't get to do often and you don't feel like you have that strength, practicing, it gets better and easier every single time. And so just know that it's difficult work. And the more you do it, the easier it gets. And you're just cooler every single time because sometimes people just have ideas and they don't ever go anywhere. They don't share them with anybody. Um, and that's a lot easier. It's a lot easier than it is to bring it to life. So if you're doing that, kudos to you. If you need more assistance doing that, I am here. I love doing this. It's one of my favorite things that I get to do with credit union. So please feel free to reach out to me. And if you have any questions, I would be more than happy to answer them.
Yeah, we can take some live questions. In fact, we have a few minutes for that. So if anyone's looking to pop on the mic for less than a minute for your question, please feel free to do so right now. Um, and interrupt me to do that. I'm just gonna continue talking unless someone has a question. One thing that I will point out is, through my career, putting together one of these innovations is something that actually helped me become well known within my credit union. I worked at a natural personal credit union in the Pacific Northwest. For those who didn't know, I started in the call center as well and worked my way up or around, I guess, not really up, up and around, maybe both. And sometimes that's the way your career works, right? But I had that support to put together an entire plan to present to my subcommittee for innovation and ideas. I had that opportunity, and that helped me understand all of these steps. And just even like going through that, knowing that it may not happen, but having the support and the feedback that I received from all of the stakeholders to put the package together to present was a great exercise, and no one's ever going to say don't do it, but it does take time. So really finding the buy-in is a big deal there for innovation. Yeah, and you know what, honestly, I love that Charity is on here. Hi, Charity. Good to see you. Charity is probably one of our
Good
furthest away
evening.
folks attending. It's pretty late in the evening where you are, Charity. Did you have any questions or any thoughts on how innovation would work for you there, where you're at? We don't, if you want to share where you are, that would be wonderful too. If internet connection allows, that's a whole other thing.
So, yes, I hope you are doing well. Hello, Ari, please can you hear me? Hello.
Hi, Charity. Yes, we can hear you. Okay. That's all right. Charity is a pretty big deal where she's at. And I always
Hello,
get
Ari. I hope you hear me. Yes. Yes. So, I have a workshop to know how to delve into. Yes, we have something in mind, but you need to learn from the youth what they really want and what the issues are, and that will really help us to have a wonderful workshop.
Yeah, and where Charity's at is really heavy into the youth movement right now, really getting young people involved. So, for those who don't know why this is important for her to learn about, the average age of well, I guess they call it a median age, really, is 18 years old in the whole country of Africa. Um, so just knowing that innovation is a huge thing to help propel young membership, and I know that we all have some tough with that. So, again, just leaving the floor open for questions. Courtney, did you have anything else you wanted to add? Oh, sorry, who was that?
I have nothing else to add except that, again, the slides are going to be available to all of you. So feel free to utilize those as you need. And yeah, feel free to reach out. You have my email here. So if you ever have questions on what I've seen or what works, I mean, I'm not even gonna say what doesn't work because times are always changing and what didn't work yesterday might work today. So just always
Well,
happy to chat innovation.
yeah, and remember, what it didn't work yesterday didn't work, that what works might work today.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid to touch back on some old stuff that you're like, well, this was really good. Why don't we look back at that and reevaluate how we can plug that back in? Because just because it didn't work before doesn't mean it doesn't work now. So thank you so much, Courtney. You know, lots of highlights from my notes, even on some stuff that I needed some good refreshers on. So I always appreciate that. I dropped in a lot of my information, the Worldwide Foundation, the World Council of Credit Unions information in the chat. Please reach out to us with any questions you have. I appreciate all of you being here today or this evening or this morning, depending on where you're at in the world. Thank you so much for being here on behalf of myself, YCUP, and the Worldwide Foundation. Have a wonderful day. Adios. Hasta luego. You know, there's lots of other languages.
Thank you.
Spanish is my primary,
I
so
mean, yes.
great to see you all.
Oh.